So you want to be president? Continued.
It's a good thing he grew up on a 600-acre farm. James Polk and James Buchanan both had 9 siblings. George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, and John Kennedy each had 8. Two presidents were orphans, Andrew Jackson and Herbert Hoover. A president in your family tree is a plus. John Quincy Adams was John Adams' son. Theodore Roosevelt and Franklin Roosevelt were 5th cousins. Benjamin Harrison was William Harrison's grandson, and James Madison and Zachary Taylor were 2nd cousins. Some presidents threw money around, and some were penny pinchers. James Monroe ordered French silverware, china, candlesticks, chandeliers, clocks, mirrors, vases, rugs, draperies, and furniture for the White House. 93 crates in all. William Harrison was thrifty. That means he didn't spend very much money. He walked to the market every morning with a basket over his arm. Do you have a pet? All kinds of pets have lived in the White House, mostly dogs. Herbert Hoover had 3 dogs, Pinky, Snowflake, and Tut. Tut must have been a Democrat. He and his Republican master never got along. Franklin Roosevelt's dog Fala was almost as famous as his owner. George Bush's dog wrote Millie's book, Adventures of a White House Dog, as reported to Mr. Bush. Ulysses Grant had horses. Benjamin Harrison's goat pulled his grandchildren around in a cart. The Coolidges had a pet raccoon, and Jimmy Carter and Bill Clinton preferred cats. Theodore Roosevelt's children didn't just have pets, they ran a zoo. They had dogs, cats, guinea pigs, snakes, mice, rats, badgers, raccoons, parrots, and a Shetland pony called Algonquin. To cheer up his sick brother, young Quentin once took Algonquin upstairs in the White House elevator. You don't have to be musical to be president. Ulysses Grant certainly wasn't. He knew only 2 tunes. One was Yankee Doodle, and he said the other one isn't. But many presidents were musical. Thomas Jefferson, John Tyler, and Woodrow Wilson played the violin. John Quincy Adams played the flute. Chester Arthur, the banjo. Harry Truman and Richard Nixon, the piano. Bill Clinton, the saxophone. And Warren Harding, almost any brass instrument, including the sousaphone. Some presidents knew how to dance and some didn't. Our first president, George Washington, did a mean minuet. At his inaugural ball, George Washington danced with every lady but his wife. She had stayed home. James Madison's opinion of his inaugural ball: I would much rather be in bed. Abraham Lincoln was not much of a dancer. Miss Todd, I should like to dance with you the worst way, he told his future wife. Miss Todd later said to a friend, he certainly did. Oh. Woodrow Wilson liked to do the jig step while singing silly songs. Not all presidents danced, but most had a sport or a hobby. John Quincy Adams was a first-rate swimmer. Ulysses Grant raced his rig through the streets of Washington and was arrested for speeding. Rutherford Hayes played croquet on the White House lawn. Ronald Reagan split wood. William McKinley's idea of exercise was to sit under a tree with a good book. Golf has been big with presidents. Dwight Eisenhower and John Kennedy were especially good. But when Gerald Ford, George Bush, and Bill Clinton teamed up for a golf game, 3 of their shots clobbered spectators. Oh no, that means they got hit. Though most presidents went to college, 9 didn't. George Washington, Andrew Jackson, Martin Van Buren, Zachary Taylor, Millard Fillmore, Abraham Lincoln, Andrew Johnson, Grover Cleveland, and Harry Truman. Andrew Johnson couldn't even read until he was 14, and he didn't learn to write until after he was married. Thomas Jefferson was top-notch in the brains department. He was an expert on agriculture, law, politics, music, geography, surveying, philosophy, and botany. In his spare time, he designed his own house, a mansion, founded the University of Virginia, and whipped up the Declaration of Independence. No big deal. If you want to be president, you might consider joining the Army. Several of our presidents were generals in the Army. If you can't be a general, just be a hero like Theodore Roosevelt or John Kennedy. Roosevelt's Rough Riders charged up Kettle Hill to help win the Spanish-American War, and Kennedy led his crew to safety in World War II when the Japanese sank his boat. Don't be a Franklin Pierce. In his first battle, Franklin Pierce's horse bucked and he was thrown against his saddle and fainted. His horse fell and broke its leg, and Pierce hurt his knee. He got elected anyway. Another route to the White House is to be vice president, though most don't think much of the job. John Tyler, Millard Fillmore, Calvin Coolidge, and Harry Truman moved up when a president got sick and died. Andrew Johnson, Chester Arthur, Teddy Roosevelt, and Lyndon Johnson became the president when guns were drawn, bullets flew, and a president was assassinated. That means killed. Almost any job can lead to the White House. Presidents have been lawyers, teachers, farmers, sailors, engineers, surveyors, mayors, governors, congressmen, senators, and ambassadors. Harry Truman owned a men's shop. Andrew Johnson was a tailor. And Ronald Reagan was a movie actor. One thing is certain. If you want to be president and stay president, be honest. Harry Truman paid for his own postage stamps. Grover Cleveland was famous for his motto, "Tell the truth." Other presidents weren't so honest. Democrat Bill Clinton was impeached for lying under oath. Republican Richard Nixon's staff broke into Democratic headquarters to steal campaign secrets. He covered up the crime and then lied about it. That was the end of Richard Nixon as president. So there you have it, a mixture of U.S. presidents. What did they think of being the head man? George Washington, who became our very first president in 1789, worried about his new line of work. "I greatly fear that my countrymen will expect too much from me," he wrote to a friend, but he was a howling success. Some loved the job of president. "No president has ever enjoyed himself as much as I," said Theodore Roosevelt. "Others hated it. They were the 4 most miserable years of my life," complained John Quincy Adams. Every president was different from every other, and yet no woman has ever been president. Not yet. But in your lifetime, there will be a female president, for sure. No person of color has ever been president. Now, that's not true because this book is a little bit old. So this book was written before Barack Obama was president, and he was our first Black president, which is really cool. And next, it's going to be a woman. It's said that people who run for president have swelled heads. That means they think they're so great, and they're not very humble. It's said that people who run for president are greedy. They want power, and they want fame. But being president can be wanting to serve your country, like George Washington, who left the Virginia plantation he loved 3 times to lead the country he loved even more. It can be looking toward the future, like Thomas Jefferson, who bought the Louisiana Territory and then sent Lewis and Clark, who were explorers, west to find a route to the Pacific, and they did. They walked west and took boats. It can be wanting to turn lives around, like Franklin Roosevelt, who provided soup and bread for the hungry, jobs for the jobless, and funds for the elderly to live on. Funds are money. It can be wanting to make the world a better place, like John Kennedy, who sent Peace Corps volunteers around the globe to teach and help others. Every single president has taken this oath. An oath is like a promise. They say, "I do solemnly swear that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States and will, to the best of my ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States." That's only 35 words, but it's a big promise when you're president of this country. Abraham Lincoln was tops at filling that order. That means he was the best. I know very well that many others might in this matter as in others do better than I can, he said, but I am here. I must do the best I can and bear the responsibility of taking the course which I feel I ought to take. That's the bottom line. Tall, short, large, thin, talkative, quiet, vain, humble, lawyer, teacher, soldier. That is what most of our presidents have tried to do, each in his own way. Some succeeded and some failed. If you want to be president, a good president, pattern yourself after the best. Our best have asked more of themselves than they thought they could give. They have had the courage, the spirit, and the will to do what they knew was right. Most of all, their first priority has always been the people and the country they served. Maybe one day, one of you will grow up to be president. Or maybe you're thinking, I would never want to do that job. Today for Literature Response, tell me something you learned about one of these many presidents, or tell me what you think about being president. Have fun.